In the next 20 minutes or so, we'll give you a short overview over ecosystem service assessment in southern Transylvania. I'm working in a project about sustainable land use in this area. We're a working group led by Jan Fischer and with 2 postdocs and 4 PhD students. It's a 5-year project. We're in the 3rd year now, so it's some intermediate results. And we're an interdisciplinary research team. That means we are ecologists and social scientists, and I will not say so much about modeling. This is more mixture of ecology and social sciences, what you will hear today. So the study area is located in Central Romania. It's at the foothills of the Carpathian Mountains. It's a hilly landscape. The study area covers an area of over 7,000 square kilometers, and the main land cover types are a mosaic of forest, pasture, and arable land. Land use is dominated by semi-subsistence farming on a small scale and low intensity. And due to these more traditional farming practices, we have a very rich biodiversity in the area. And there's also rich cultural heritage there. So which are research questions? We were interested in which services do people derive from nature in Transylvania? Is there certain ecosystem services that co-occur? Is there bundles of ecosystem services? And can we find spatial patterns of ecosystem service provisioning in the area? A typical village in Transylvania looks like this. You have, in the middle of the valley, you have the village, and surrounding that there's gardens. Then still in the shallow areas there's fields around the villages, and then on the slopes there's pasture, there's sheep and cattle grazing, and mostly on the ridges and on the hills there's forest. We used the village as the unit of analysis in our study because we think that it's meaningful both in an ecological sense and a social sense. And in the lack of official village borders, we calculated what we call village catchments. This is the area that is most easily accessible from one village. So we structured our study area into these village catchments. This is around 450 villages in the area, and we selected 30 of those villages to make an in-depth study for ecosystem services. These 30 villages were selected randomly, but stratified over terrain ruggedness, and so that we cover both flat, intermediate, and hilly villages equally, and over protection status. So almost half of the area is protected by Natura 2000 sites. And these are the main ecosystem services sorted according to the Millennium Ecosystem Groups. The main ecosystem services people derive there in this area, and we assessed some of them. So within a project we call it natural capital because we don't know exactly which of the functions are really used by people. So, for example, for crops, we calculated proportion of arable land in the catchment. For the livestock-related services, we calculated proportion of pasture, fruit from orchards, forest products like timber, firewood, mushrooms, and berries from proportion of forest. Then we have hunting data for the area, so population size of hunted species. We calculated carbon stocks in biomass and soil. We have data on pollinator abundance from Unequal College. We calculated an index of scenic beauty of the area, and we assessed biodiversity. And I want to say a bit more about the biodiversity assessment because on the one hand I'm an ecologist and you might be interested in it as well. So we last year did surveys. We had vegetation surveys in 130 sites, butterfly surveys in 120 sites, and bird surveys in 150 sites. a site is a 1 hectare circle, and these sites, so this is one of the village catchments, this is the village in the middle, and so the brown thing is the field, then the green is the pasture, and the dark green is the forest. And we selected 5 sites per village, 30 villages by 5 sites with 150 sites. And we have 2 sites in arable, 2 in pasture, and 1 in the forest. The sites were selected randomly but stratified over cover of woody vegetation in a site and over heterogeneity, landscape heterogeneity in a site. So then we got, from the surveys, we got the richness within a site for the different species groups, and because we do not only want to say something about the sites but the whole catchments, we applied a modeling approach. So we used the richness in a site as a response variable in a generalized linear model, and used vegetation, woody vegetation cover and heterogeneity as explanatory variables, and predicted richness for the 3 different groups for the whole farmland area in a village catchment. Then calculated the median value for the whole catchment, and then got a ranking of the different villages with low biodiversity and high biodiversity. So that's about biodiversity in the catchment. And based on all the different natural capital stocks we assessed, we can draw these nice colorful flow diagrams, and you can see that the different villages have quite distinct composition of natural capital, especially when you sort them alphabetically. If we sort them a bit more according to how similar they are to each other, as we did up here in the cluster analysis, we can see that there's at least 3 different large groups. We start up here in the upper right with this group, and this is all the villages that are characterized by a high proportion of arable land in the catchment, so the arable villages. Down here is the villages with a high proportion of pasture. And on the left-hand side, you can see the villages with the high proportion of forest. And they happen to have also high proportion of orchards, high pollinator abundance, high scenic beauty, a lot of hunting potential, high carbon stocks, and high richness values. So we find 3 major bundle types of these villages, and obviously the forest villages are those with the highest diversity of natural capital. So coming back to our research questions, which services do people in southern Transylvania derive from nature? We can't answer these questions with what I've shown you here. We have another assessment where we really asked people what do they value, what do they derive from nature. So, but we can say at least something about the potential of ecosystem services in the villages. We can find bundles of ecosystem services, so we have arable, pasture, and forest bundle, and we can see that there are spatial patterns of ecosystem services. If we look at the bundles of the arable village, they're up here in the north western parts, pastures in the southern part, in the forests more or less in the middle, in between. That's what we did so far about ecosystem services, and now I want to broaden a little bit up to the other parts of our project. What does it all mean to people in southern Transylvania now and in the future? There's a strong desire for economic development in the area, and people are eager to develop, and they don't necessarily want to continue the traditional land use techniques and to want to earn money and things like that. So there's a strong desire for development, but there's also this threat to lose the cultural heritage, the ecological integrity, and it's certain that ecosystem service potential, natural capital, will not remain as it is now. So we posed a question of how sustainable development can look like in the future, and therefore we need to understand a bit what the future might hold for this area. And we believe that, so we did a good start with a natural capital assessment that we looked at already. So we believe that the local conditions in a village catchment are important for the future trajectory of a village, of a catchment, of the people in a village. It somehow defines the pathway, what's the potential of this village, in which direction can it develop. So we did a good start here. We have this ecosystem service bundles in the different villages. We have different structure and ethnic composition. So in some areas there's a lot of Hungarians, in other areas there's a lot of Roma. We have different infrastructures. There's some villages there that are quite isolated from the bigger towns in the area, and there's the terrain structure, and there's different village size. So we know something about the local conditions in the villages, but we do not know something about the regional dynamics. What are the factors that are most important? Which factors shape the development in the area? And for this, we did last year several workshops with over 17 organizations and individuals from the area, where we asked people what are the main changes in past, present, and futures, what are the main drivers of change, how do the different drivers and variables influence each other. And what we got out of this is something what here looks a bit messy still, is systems understanding. And we summarized the systems understanding from the different workshops in this causal loop diagram. And for example, at the moment there's a low profitability of small-scale farming, and this can lead to intensification of land use. This can lead to selling of land to foreigners, and it also can lead to abandonment of land and that people leave the villages. So this is an understanding how certain variables influence each other. And we also asked people what they think in which type of villages these variables are most important. So you can see the boxed variables here, and we asked people for all of them, what do you think, in which kind of village would, for example, tourism development happen? Is it a large village, a small village with a lot of Hungarians, village with closely connected to towns? And based on this, we could combine our knowledge on the local conditions and the regional dynamic in something that we call social ecological inertia, so which means the current development trend. What's the current trend of a village? And we translated this into maths. We have the different variables that you saw just a few seconds ago as in boxes in the causal loop diagram. And we can see here, so the red means that there's an improvement in economy, and the blue means that it's getting worse. So we can get spatial patterns of the different variables. So intensification, for example, takes mostly place, is most likely in the northwestern area, where it is very flat and there's large valleys. So we have an understanding of the current trends, what's happening now, but we don't know something about what might happen in the future. And for this, we developed scenarios, also with the local organizations and stakeholders in the scenarios in the workshops last year. And our scenarios are structured like that. We have two main axes. One axis describes an external uncertainty, which is the national and supranational policy that can be pro-economy or pro-environment. And we have a second axis that describes more or less the internal uncertainty, namely the ability of locals to capitalize on opportunities. And within the space of these two axes, we have four scenarios. Scenario one, prosperity through growth, which is the kind of Western European type of development. So locals intensify agricultural land use, and so they benefit from it. The area prospers, but also they lose a lot of natural capital, a lot of regulating services, for example. Scenario two, I'll lend their wealth, their locals are not able to intensify use opportunities and intensify land, so foreigners come and buy land and intensify land use, and locals do not benefit from it. Scenario 3, balance brings beauty. It's a pro-environment setting where the policy fosters organic farming, for example, and in this scenario locals are able to organize and to develop diversified and also intensified but organic farming. And then there's a fourth scenario, missed opportunity, which is kind of the poverty heat trap. So locals are not able to make use of the policy conditions, and they're pretty poor. Many leave the area, and there's only a few foreigners that do organic farming. So and we use these scenarios and combine them together with the current development trends, and we can display it in maps again. So up here is the inertia maps that you saw earlier, and we have the different variables, and we looked under which scenario are certain developments intensified, amplified, and under which scenarios are they dampened. So for example, if we look at land use intensification, that takes place pretty much over all scenarios, independently, not so much about missed opportunity here, but it's pretty congruent pattern, while other developments, for example tourism development, only mostly takes place in this scenario and a little bit in this, while for example in this scenario tourism goes pretty much back. So we have a quite good understanding of might happen in the future, and we are at the moment in the process of publishing these results, both in the scientific journals as well as for locals. So we're putting together a booklet with the scenario results, and want to distribute them and want to do some more workshops with the people there in order to foster discussion, to bring people together, to get a common vision of the future, and so that people get inspired to think about the future and try to develop a joint, so that try to work together in the future to achieve the desired outcomes. We're planning to assess 1 or 2 more ecosystem services in catchment, so we will have a master student doing that, and we also want to look a bit closer at the trajectories for the different natural capitals under scenario conditions and how the bundles and trade-offs might change. And we're also doing a lot more social stuff where we ask people which parts of the landscape they value, and to get a closer understanding of how people there see the landscape. Thank you very much.